my name is Ben Eady, and I'm the Online Media Manager for ModernAnalyst.com, the premier online community for business analysts. I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar titled Master BI, Becoming a Business Intelligence Guru with Toad. Today's featured speakers are Julia Hyman, Senior Project Manager, and Joanna Schloss, Project Marketing Manager. The webinar will last approximately 60 minutes, including the Q&A session. So make sure to submit your questions in advance using the questions feature of the webinar software. I'd also like to say thank you to Quest Software for sponsoring this event. And at this time, I'll turn it over to Joanna to get us started.
Thanks so much, Ben. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us on this exciting broadcast around Toad Business Intelligence Suite. With me today is our esteemed product manager and the owner of the BI suite here at Quest Software. She'll be spending the webinar time with you to share with you some successes and customer interactions that we've had with our new offering, which actually went live last week at GA last week Wednesday. And she'll be giving you a brief view of the product. At the end of the webinar, we'd be very excited to answer any questions you might have regarding this offer. With that, I'll turn it over to Julie.
Good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, good evening, as the case may be. Thank you very much for spending your time with me today. When we scheduled this webinar with Modern Analyst, I was very excited about the title and the topic and showing our product, the new Toad Business Intelligence Suite, within the context of mastering BI. But when I went to sit down a few weeks ago and put together the presentation and decide what I wanted to share with you folks, I wanted to take a step back and kind of talk about the topic of mastering BI and what it means to be a BI guru in general. And then I'll lead that into how we feel the Toad Business Intelligence Suite helps, and then we can actually take a look at the product together and kind of look at some of our successful use cases with our customers. So I'm going to start a little bit high, but if you bear with me, we'll talk just a little bit about successful business intelligence in general and how you can fit into that as a guru. So having said that, let me get my slides to advance here. Okay, I'm going to just, as I said, start real high. Bear with me. Most of you out there know this, but I'm going to do a traditional approach to BI, a summary. I'm going to do 30 years of business intelligence in 3 minutes or less on this slide. So the way that business intelligence has grown up in the industry, it has grown up in our organizations, is really started off with governance, data governance, getting control of the data that's out there, getting control of the environment, putting data management, security in place, and pushing out dashboards and reports to our users. That's sort of where we started as an industry and how we've grown up. The idea here and the end result here is that we were looking for governance first, and governance sometimes came at the expense of agility. So some of the items that came to forefront of this model, right, was that business intelligence traditionally has been controlled and implemented by IT, because when you talk about availability, when you talk about governance, when you talk about security, you're always talking about a governing body like IT that can manage that. And obviously the technologies were implemented by IT. Traditionally, when you talk about business intelligence, you're talking about canned reports and dashboards. For a while, it was all about canned reports, and then dashboards became the greatest thing, and so there's lots of dashboard writing and dashboard innovation and technology. But at the end of the day, you're pushing out data from IT into your business environment. And business intelligence, in the past and traditionally has been a waterfall delivery method. So any of you who are familiar with R&D understand that. Waterfall means there's a phase at the very beginning of the project where you sit down and get all of your requirements documented and agreed upon, and then the people who are going to develop those requirements into a deliverable go into a black box. They go away for 3 months, maybe 6 months, and at the end they come back and deliver what you asked for 3 to 6 months ago. Okay? That works, and it's worked traditionally in R&D for a long time, but what we found is that it really doesn't meet the speed of business in today's world, right? So maybe 20 years ago that would work, maybe even 10 years ago it had its successes, but today what happens is by the time IT delivers the canned reports and dashboards that business has asked for, business is already coming up with new requirements, right? The speed of business is much faster than the speed of development in this methodology. So what happens is IT gets a backlog of new requests. And a backlog of new requests really means unfulfilled requirements from the business, which means at the end of the day you have dissatisfied business users. So in this sort of traditional approach to BI, business intelligence, I think IT gets sort of a bad rap when you're talking to the business, because at the end of the day there's a lot of investment, there's a lot of work, there's a lot of time and effort, but the end result, although it comes up with canned reports and dashboards, it might be satisfying, let's say 70% of the business whose requirements still match the original requirements that were documented and implemented. There's that very loud, typically 25-30% of the business that has new requirements, that feels dissatisfied with what they're being given. I love these dashboards, but what I really want to see is X, or these reports are great, can you just slice the data slightly differently? All of that ends up back on IT's shoulders. Okay? So out of that, the pendulum sort of swinging from governance over agility, the pendulum is now swinging to agility over governance. Okay, and this is where self-service BI comes in, because what is happening out there in the market is there is a vacuum. There's requirements out there that business has expressed and frustrations they have expressed, and so business will always do what it can to get the data that it needs to make its decisions, and so there are business workarounds that have been happening. And if you're in IT, you know these as chaotic data marts and spread marts that have cropped up all over your organization like wildfires, that really, from an IT perspective, break the governance model that you spent so much time putting together. So that data is sometimes unsecured, it's certainly unsanctioned, and it's out there, and it's what's driving business decisions, and that's exactly the model that you were trying to solve with the governance. So overall, what can happen if there's lots of data marts and spread marts is business might feel that they're getting their requirements met by themselves by coming up with Excel, Access, workarounds, but there is an overall loss of data confidence. Where did this data come from? Why does my data not match your data anymore? And there's a feeling that there's been a low return on business intelligence. Right? So all this investment, all of this time, and still it's not meeting our needs, and still we're coming up with these workarounds that are sort of breaking the model. Okay, so that's sort of self-service business intelligence at its worst. The idea, the vision is agility and governance, that these two things have equal importance and need to live together. There's lots and lots of definitions of self-service BI that you can find out there. I go with the simplest, is that I start with the business, because it's the business requirement that really drove all this from the very beginning. And so business has the power to meet their own analytic needs. They're not throwing everything on IT's shoulders and then complaining about the rate of return. But IT is still playing an essential role in enabling and supporting the needs of the business to make data-driven decisions. So it really is a balance that we're striving for. And that balance isn't all that easy to achieve, so I'm going to kind of talk about that right now. What makes 4 things that need to be in place to make good self-service BI. So in the context of being a business intelligence guru, right, and mastering BI, it's really beyond technical skills. Technical skills are certainly important, and we'll talk about that when we get to the right tools part of this. But beyond the technical skills, you really need the right structure within the organization and the right pieces to make it work, because individual successes are great, but sustainability is what wins overall. Okay, so if you've ever been in an environment where you are not sure what the end goal is, right? We all don't have an agreed upon sort of success criteria that we're working for, sort of a sustainable model, that's our vision. You've probably been in a situation, especially if you've been an analyst working in BI and you're very good at self-service, or people turn to you, where you have daily wins, right? Every day or every week someone's saying, this is great, you're my hero, you're getting my data. But at the end of a period, right, a quarter, a month, a year, you feel that you've lost, right? Because you're still running 3 times as fast to get to the same place, and there's no sort of system that's built up around you where you don't have to put heroic efforts in to get to the data that you want. So let me kind of break this down. I define it as 4 things that need to be in place in order to get sustainable self-service business intelligence, so that as an organization you can master BI and that you can perform personally as a guru within this environment with good payoffs for you. And first is right governance, right partnership, right attitude, and finally, right tools. Right? So 3 of these are more about the organization and 1 is about the tool set, and that's where we come in. But let me kind of go through these in order. So right governance. Regardless of what you do and what tools you choose and methodologies, you can't ignore the basics, right? Governance of data is not an IT problem that needs to be gotten around by the business. It's as simple as garbage in, garbage out, right? You need data quality and you need data security. And at the end of the day, you and all of your business partners in an organization need to be speaking one language and one truth. So you need to eliminate the chaos around your data so that you can focus on the intelligence, the information, and the wisdom of the data. Okay? So you always can't ignore the basics. So whatever process and methodology you put in place for self-service BI, it has to have governance built in. 2 is the right partnership. The whole is greater than the sum of its parts, and that is very much true in business intelligence as it is in most things. Best practices need to be learned by an organization and adopted by an organization, and best practices are always a team effort. To get to this right partnership, you definitely need well-defined roles for IT and the line of business. Remember we talked about a little bit earlier, IT needs to support the line of business, and the line of business needs to be empowered at the same time. So those well-defined roles will help that be a successful partnership. Whatever processes you put in place, if it's the line of business being self-empowered, those processes need to be collaborative processes. You don't want all these individuals working separately within an organization to get to the same end result. You need individuals to be able to collaborate together, especially on data. Right? Data is driving decisions, and decisions are rarely, individuals within an organization. Decisions are things that you need to collaborate on and share across an organization. You need commitment and buy-in. Business intelligence is a big structural phenomenon, right? There's data on the back end that's being serviced and sustained in all sorts of different data architectures depending on the kind of data that it is. And that data is being served up to the organization in various ways, canned reports and dashboards and self-service methodologies. And all of that involves a lot of people in your organization. So all of the stakeholders need commitment and buy-in to that process. And finally, best practices are very iterative, and so adopting and adapting to what works. Whenever you get stuck in a philosophy in business and say, well, this is the way it needs to work and this is the way it will always work for us, you know that that's probably not going to work in the long run. Business changes, our technology changes, our needs changes, and so you need to have a process in place and a partnership that doesn't resist adopting and adapting what works. And lastly, the right attitude. And this is really important because as tension has grown up in business intelligence, now we talked about IT being in charge of governance and business being unsatisfied and coming up with their own solutions, sometimes that's ended up with some tension between these groups, some adversarial conflict between these groups where they see each other as getting in each other's way of the end goal. And so having the right attitude across your organization is important, right? Everybody needs to be bought into this. And so really it is the age of agile. One of the biggest keywords in business intelligence is agility. R&D certainly has agile processes. Everybody wants to be able to adapt quickly. And so really 2 key things to remember are iterating and empowering. So you need to encourage a self-help mindset in an organization. You need to give people the right tools, make sure that they're trained on the right tools, and encourage them to help themselves to the data and set up the structures that make that possible. You need a lean startup mentality. So if you've never heard of the book Lean Startup, it really talks about how to bring solutions to your customers, and I should say better solutions to your customers quicker, being able to respond to your market. Now, it talks about it from starting up an organization, right? Starting up a traditional startup company that's servicing a market. But when you think about your job every day, you have internal customers, right? You are serving a product up to your customers, whether that is within the same company or you actually have customers in a market. So the lean startup mentality is all about getting the requirements from your customers and iterating out to them very quickly a solution, whether it's a proof of concept or a quick iteration to get it back out to the customer. So what you're trying to avoid here with this lean startup mentality is that black box we talked about at the beginning, where you gather all your requirements in a very thorough investigation, and then you go away and you leave your customer alone, right? You leave your market alone for 3-6 months, and then ta-da, here is the result, only to find that things have changed, or you got one of the requirements slightly wrong, and so now you have to go back. So you want to have a very close and tight relationship with your customer, and that's the lean startup. I have like a way of looking at things that follows the neuro-linguistic processing model. It sounds complicated, but it's really simple. It's called chunking down, not up. Okay, so chunking up is when you take a problem, a specific problem, and make it bigger. Okay, so a case of this in an organization is wherever you have a requirement, like I would like to see my sales regions coupled with this marketing data in a way that's not been available before. Simple request, right? Seems to the business like a simple request. To chunk up that requirement would be to take it back and say, well, that's interesting. Perhaps there's other aspects of that data that you want to see. Let's do a thorough investigation of this requirement. Let's get everybody together in a room. Let's go through a process, and let's get all the requirements so we're not doing small pieces of work, but rather doing one big piece of work that satisfies everybody's needs. On the surface, that can sound very good, especially if you have a persuasive speaker who believes in that methodology. But what you're really doing is taking something small that potentially could be agile and that could be lean and turning it into something big, which will take a longer period of time, has a lot more stakeholders, has a lot more barriers to success. And I know I certainly have examples in my business life where I've asked for something or wanted some input on something, and then it turned into a huge project run by a huge program management organization, which was effective, but I just wanted something small, so I abandoned that request and just did it myself, that kind of feeling. So that's chunking up. Chunking down is the opposite. Right? Chunking down is taking something and breaking it out into the smallest deliverable parts. Okay, so if I have a simple request, like I would like to see the sales data and this marketing data merged, and maybe my request has 3 months worth of work is what we think it might take in order to see that merging of data in the environment that we've built, can we break that down into, let's say, 3 deliveries of 1 month each, or even better, a couple of deliveries within that first month to make sure we've got it right? So something where you can iterate back to your audience. So rather than taking the approach of let's get everybody's input, let's make sure we don't duplicate work, let's do it faster, do it leaner. And there might be some duplication of work in there, but you know that what you're doing is actually more responsive to your audience, to your customer base. Build up success. So what that means is, again, don't go for that long goal, like in 2 years we're going to roll this out and everyone's going to love it. Find a way to empower people to produce successes at a much smaller rate so that you can have a process of success, right? Have it so that you can have a rollout 1 that's after a month and a rollout 2 that's after 2 months. Show people what's happening. Build up your success rate rather than waiting for the big reveal at the end. And finally, nurture your power users. There's a concept out there in the market, I think it was started by Forrester, of the hero, right? The highly empowered, resourceful operator within an organization, right? These are your go-to people in your organization, and everybody has them. I'm sure in all the groups that you guys work with, you can think of one or two people that you go to in an organization when you need to get something done. You have your preferred people to work with. Those are your heroes. Those are your power users. And those people should not be penalized, but they should be nurtured, right? We should be rewarding them and having them teach others how to be like them, as opposed to restricting them with process, right? Maybe they're breaking a process, and that annoys a lot of people. If that's the case, but they're still the go-to person, you've got to figure out where the process itself is broken. So don't bend these people to the process. Figure out how the process can fit them, because they're your power users. They're the people that are getting things done in your organization, and that should be valued. Okay. So lastly, certainly importantly, but lastly is the right tools, okay? So you've got all that in place and you're working toward all that. If you don't have the tools out there that truly empower your end user to self-service off of your business intelligence data, off of your data architectures, then all of that is for naught, because it makes, regardless of how much they want to collaborate and want to do the right thing, they can't. So the tools are the things that actually empower them from a technology perspective to get the job done. And so you want tools that serve that self-service cause. And what that means from our perspective is the right tool for the right job for the right user. Okay, and so the first thing we want to think about is built for the right end user. There's a lot of self-service tools on the market. It's a rich market, and as self-service has become more and more of an initiative and a push, different vendors have tried to supply self-service tools, from the big vendors to some small disruptors. I think one of the things that hasn't been gotten right in the industry as often as it should have is understanding that there are different personas for this self-service user, right? There are people who are data experts, people who understand how data needs to be put together, how it needs to be formatted, how it needs to be massaged in order for it to make sense, where it needs to be sourced from, how it needs to be compiled. And then there are line of business experts, people who will understand the business, right, your subject matter experts. And those folks might not understand the data sourcing, but they know the questions that they want answered, and they know that if this data was given to them, that they could answer the questions from it. So they're really your decision makers and the people who can analyze the data. So we call them, in our Toad Business Intelligence Suite, we separate them out with the terms the analytic provisioner, that's the data expert, and the analytic expert. Right? That's the person that once they've been given the right data set, they can do wonders with it. Right? They know how to slice and dice and get in there and find the wisdom that's hidden in that data. So having tools that are suited for each one of those types is important. Otherwise, you are hobbling your power users, your data experts, with a tool that's just about visualization, or you're not giving the right kind of creative data exploratory visualization tool to your analytic expert. And it really is two roles. I mean, occasionally you'll find the same person filling it, but more than likely people tend toward one or the other. They tend toward the visualization and the data discovery, or they tend toward the more technical data provisioning. The tools need to be intuitive to use. This is all about self-service, right? So this is not about acquiring a whole new skill set. This is about having tools that are intuitive, that understand your workflow, understand your process, and that fit to what you're trying to achieve, as opposed to you learning a whole new language to talk with them or use them. They have to be cost-effective, right? You're talking about empowering a large user base of people, and you want to make sure that you don't have a high-cost barrier to that, so that you're only choosing a few people to self-serve just because of the cost, right? You want it to be something that can be pervasive in your organization, and so cost-effectiveness is important. And of course, you need a powerful feature set. And the features that I'm going to talk about here and show in the product, I'm going to focus, I mean, there's lots of different features we can talk about, but I'm going to focus on these 4 areas. Connectivity, the ability to get to all the different data sources that you have growing within your organization. Integration, the ability not only to get to these sources, but integrate them. Analysis, the ability once you've got that data set to investigate it, to slice it and dice it, and to visualize it, and then the ability to collaborate, right, to work as a team. Those 4 feature sets, I think, really underscore the sort of 4 things we've talked about with sustainability with self-service. So let me talk a little bit now about what Toad offers in this area. So we've got the Toad Business Intelligence Suite. Is actually a suite of products, and there's 3 products that are put together in the Toad BI suite. There are 2 desktop products. These are the products that are sort of the end-user facing products, and those are Toad Decision Point and Toad Datapoint. Hopefully the icons kind of imply what they are, but the Toad Decision Point icon is pointing to the fact that this is your visualization. This is your analytic expert tool. So this is all about once you've got that right data set, embellishing it somewhat, and then just investigating and giving creative data discovery through visualizations and dimensional analysis and even tabular views of that data. Then you've got Toad Datapoint, which is also a desktop tool, so the end-user facing tool, and this is all about that analytic provisioner. So this is a powerful tool that allows you to put together the right data sets without having to be a developer, right? So a more technical user is going to gravitate toward this tool, but it certainly does not need to be an engineer, right, a hardcore IT person that's doing this. And then tying it all together is Toad Intelligence Central. This is our collaborative platform where the 2 end-user tools can talk with each other. And it also has embedded into it a virtual data layer, and we'll talk about that, where you can actually stage data and do virtual data integration through that collaborative platform. So fit in your environment. Let's go back to governance and the importance of governance in any kind of sustainable self-service BI model. Right now in your organization, more than likely you have business intelligence investments that you've made that supply the kind of governance and security and master data management you need to have that solid data foundation which to do your reporting and your discovery and your analysis on top of. And we talked about if you don't have this, then potentially you've got fantastic analysis happening on top of chaos, right? Garbage in, garbage out scenarios. But with the investments that you have today, they're probably, for most organizations, they're wide and varied. So you might have a corporate business intelligence platform that you've invested in. Maybe something like Salesforce is your corporate BI platform, right, something in the cloud, or maybe you've got business objects, SAP's business objects that you're using as your reporting platform, or Oracle Business Intelligence. Our products connect up to those platforms and allow you to query off them, respecting the governance and the security that are in place with those platforms. So we snap in alongside those existing architectures and allow you to get different kinds of analysis and self-service analysis off of those architectures. At the same time, we're snapping in alongside of all of your relational databases that you have out there. So a lot of times you've got a corporate BI that's covering, let's say, 80% of your data footprint. That 20% is not to be ignored. It is an important part of your data story. And so having one tool that can connect both to that corporate BI structure as well as any other relational databases that you have out there and tie that data together is critical to self-service. And we connect to all the relational databases out there. We've got IBM and Oracle, SQL Server, Sybase, MySQL, and we have ODBC connectivity to all the rest, Teradata and Teza. In addition, we don't list it here on the diagram, but I kind of lump it in with the relational databases because it's been around for a long time, is Excel. I mean, Excel is still, I think, the #1 used business intelligence tool out there. And so if you have to have a solution that's going to self-serve, you have to take Excel into account as a source. And so with the Toad Business Intelligence Suite, you can actually connect to that as a source as well, as opposed to always requiring the user to bring that Excel data into one of these other structures. And lastly, right now in the industry, there's this fantastic movement of NoSQL where people are capturing huge amounts of important data, and they're using the NoSQL methodologies to do that, like Hadoop and Cassandra and Mongo. So those new technologies are fantastic, but they really don't help the self-service BI picture if you can't connect to them. Because if you can't connect to them, then you have to sort of wait for IT to figure out a methodology to bring those data streams into corporate BI or into relational databases before you can touch them. But with the Toad Business Intelligence Suite, you can actually touch those sources where they live, and then again, you can query and integrate those sources with your corporate BI, with your relational databases. So the idea behind the Toad Business Intelligence Suite is that we snap in alongside the data architectures that you have today that are serving your data needs. Right? You need to have corporate BI to structure your canned reports and your dashboards. At the same time, you need to be able to experiment and grow with NoSQL. And so having a suite that can snap in alongside and grow along with your data footprint, I think is critical to self-service BI. Certainly it's an enabling technology for that architecture. Okay, so let's kind of take a screenshot look through the products just to kind of ground you as to what they look like and what they do. And let's start with that Toad Intelligence Central. That's this piece in the middle here, that's sort of that collaborative platform. And we're going to start with that because really this is the place where an IT resource can enable enable your self-service BI users. So remember, we talked about IT having a definite role to play within self-service BI, and theirs is a supporting role, an enabling role, as opposed to a provisioning role. Right? You're not going to them for your views, but they're helping to support the data architectures and your access to those data architectures so that you can get the data yourself. So part of Toad Intelligence Central is this ability to map to nearly any data source. And so you can see a quick list here of all the data sources that can be mapped to through this, this collaborative platform. So for example, right here I've captured Salesforce. If you want to enable your self-service BI users to grab Salesforce data, you might not want them all to be accessing Salesforce individually, right? That's actually an expensive proposition out there with a lot of governance rules around it. At the same time, you know, you want to give them enough access so that they're not waiting for all of the sort of larger ETL jobs to go out and pull the Salesforce data in and populate maybe those corporate BI structures that you have out there. So you want to find that happy medium where they're putting together Salesforce data with their data, but in a more agile fashion. So for example, in my screenshot here, we have an IT person who's setting up a Salesforce.com connection where users are we're quickly mapping out a snapshot of Salesforce data to be populated to this collaborative platform, let's say nightly. And it's actually going to get populated out here as a data set that refreshes itself so that your users can very quickly access the Salesforce data without hitting the Salesforce platform. Right? So let's say you've got a project out there where you've got just a limited amount of Salesforce data, just a small swatch that people want to use to see if it really enhances their analysis. Rather than having to figure out how that fits into the overall huge BI architecture, which maybe you want to do down the road if it actually turns out to be, you know, meaningful analysis, but sort of have a proof of concept stage, you can actually stage that smaller piece of data to this intelligent server, have it update, refresh nightly, weekly, whatever the right refresh rate is for your project, and have the users do their analysis with this in mind and see if that analysis proves fruitful. You know, one of the keys to successful BI is this ability to do experimentation with data, right? A lot of times you just want to see data in certain ways to see if it actually gives you wisdom, if it provides you information or intelligence. And so when you're looking at self-service BI solutions, you kind of want to have this in the back of your mind that you want something that allows you to create and destroy well. And that sounds like a strange concept, create and destroy, but it needs to be a place where you can set up an experiment very quickly without a lot of cost to your architecture, without a lot of cost to your IT or your business, see how that works out, and then if it's good analysis, you kind of absorb that back into your corporate business intelligence. But if it's not good analysis, no harm, no foul. It was an experiment. It was very low cost, low effort, and okay, it didn't prove fruitful. Fine, let's go ahead and destroy that and move on, right? Delete that mapping. Very easy within Code Intelligence Central if you know SQL. This is not sort of a SQL-enabling tool. This is the IT support platform if you want to map to this layer. And we'll talk about other ways that we use the collaborative platform, but just so you know that IT resource has a way of defining data sets, snapshots, views of the data that they want consumed by their self-service group without necessarily having to build big reports, right? The platform's there for them to put in their SQL, and then the platform will support that. Okay, let's talk about the two sort of end-user facing tools. Toad Datapoint. Okay, so this is the tool that's a little bit more technical, and it's there. Okay, so this is the person who is not a DBA, who is not a developer, who's probably got a business analyst title, but they're the data expert, right? If someone came to them saying, hey, I want to see my product and my sales and my customers all pulled together with my country roll-ups, they're going to know how to pull that data together. Maybe they're not going to know the business question and how to answer how to take that data and come up with a decision for your business, but they're going to know how to pull the data together and provision that to you. Okay, so this tool has a lot of, again, you can see from the interface that it's more technical. It's got a lot of connectivity. It's got a lot of data discovery tools where you can see tables and views and triggers. It's got some data diagramming tools, and it's got a visual query builder so that you can build your queries very easily with sort of minimal SQL knowledge. It also has a really rich, robust editor when you have that sort of deep SQL and you have that deep SQL knowledge and want to take advantage of it. So it's got that as well, but it's there to enable users, right, to help them be SQL gurus so that you can get to the right data set. Once you've set Toad Datapoint, getting it out to that Toad Intelligence Central as a collaborative piece, right, provisioning it out to the end user for analysis is simple as right mouse clicking and publishing that data. Okay, so the platform, the methodology for sharing is already in place just with the Toad Intelligence Suite. So what you're avoiding here is building data marts out there that are sort of ungovernable Access database, MySQL databases, or honestly how I think most businesses done, emailing Excel spreadsheets, right? The minute you start doing that, you start losing governance, you start losing security, you don't know where that data is going to end up, who's going to be looking at it. So it's what a lot of people do in expedience, right? I want to get this data in front of people, so I just start emailing spreadsheets around, but you lose control of data very quickly that way. So publishing is the more secure way because it's an environment that's under control. Our Datapoint, and we'll try to take a look at this in the actual product demo, has all the features that provisioner is going to need to be more productive and more efficient. So one of the big things that it does is automation, and you can see from the screenshot, it's really drag and drop automation, where you're pulling your activities into the drag and drop environment and specifying some properties and building these automation scripts that can then run independent of this user. Because a lot of provisioning activities are wash, rinse, repeat type of activities with just a little bit of flair or intelligence on the end to make the data set, really sing for that new end user. Okay, so the last end user product we're going to talk about is for that analytic expert, and this is Toad Decision Point. So Toad Point, as you can see, looks very different than Toad Datapoint. Datapoint's for that more technical user. This is more for that analytic expert, that person that's going to do some data discovery, data visualization. Okay, so this harkens back to what we said before, is that you have different personas within this self-service BI need, right? So not everybody who wants the self-service BI wants to do it the same way or provides the same role. So having a single tool for everybody to use is probably excluding some of those other skills from the conversation, right? That data provisioning skill from the conversation. And so you still have to go back to IT to get the right view, to get the right format, to get the calculated columns in the way that you need them, the right aggregation, or you're excluding the sort of visionary format, right, with the visualization. So yes, you can get to data sets and they look good, but you're still using Excel and sort of other tools to do your graphs and charts. People get their job done, but they're really not doing true data discovery, right? The tool itself is clunky enough to use that they can get to maybe the analysis they've always done, but they can't get to the analysis that they want to do. So Toad Decision Point is built for that user, and so what you're seeing here is a connection to a data set, and you can see that all of the data set immediately turns into an in-memory analytic database. And so we read it all into memory so that you can navigate through it quickly through drag and drop. So here I can just grab business unit, throw it onto my workspace, and then I can add my calculations. And so from business unit, I can put total allocation right next to it. It's automatically going to aggregate. And I can create many different views of the same data, right? Many slices and dices within the same workbook. And then I can go ahead and do my filters here. So for example, I'm looking across all of my database units here and all of my product families, locations, resources, job titles, business units. This is my filtering. But if I choose to filter down, look at just a list of Yale here. I can kind of choose just one view and look at one slice of the data very quickly. And it automatically reacts to all of the different panes that I have going on. Okay? And then from here, I can turn all of that into charting. And when I get to the charting, again, it's very visual, very drag and drop. And what we really try to do is empower you to see the differences in data. So right now I've got sort of years and quarters, and I've got my metric that I'm measuring. But then I can throw up a pane over pane and start showing differences, right? Everybody's used to calculating Excel. Okay, I can see I grew. Okay, how much did I grow? Let me create a pivot chart now that has percentages or see it different ways. But here I can create a sort of pane over pane view within one click where I can see the difference graphically on the screen. Okay. All of this can be copied to the clipboard, put into PowerPoint, which is still our way of communicating out to an organization sometimes. And so all of this can be useful collaborative data that you can use to sort of make your data story to your end customer, or to speak to the decisions that you're making, right? Because that's what data really does for us in self-service, is it fuels a story about the business decisions and the business focuses that we want to impart to our company. Okay, so look at these tools a little bit with the time that we have left so you can kind of see them in action. But I wanted to give you some screenshots so we could just sort of stop for a second and talk about them. The strength of the Toad Business Intelligence Suite, as it sort of enables the Self-Service BI, I call them my Toad takeaways. So, there's lots of deep functionality in these tools. Toad Datapoint, for example, has been on the market for 5 years, working with data analysts. There's a lot of stuff there. But if you could only take a few things away about the suite, what I want you to take away that's going to drive you to further investigation about Toad BI is, one, we have tools for more than one type of business analyst. I really do think that's key. I've never met that cookie-cutter analyst that just wants to do one thing. And honestly, the analysts that I meet in my everyday world, I work with thousands we have that are users of our Toad Datapoint, and we have users of Decision Point. They tend to fall in these categories. It's pretty true to form. You've got the provisioners and the experts. Just as a side note, occasionally I meet that person that's a provisioner and an expert at the same time. And really, I think that that's just a result of the fact that the only way they've been allowed to be an expert is if they provision their own data, right? Because the support structures aren't there to help them. They end up saying to whatever BI expert, IT person is supposed to be supporting them, just give me the data and I will do it myself, because they just can't get the data the way that they want, so they're getting multiple downloads and multiple Excel spreadsheets from different people, and they provision to themselves so that they can be the analytic expert. But honestly, I think in a self-service environment that is robust, that's working true to form, those people would be analytic experts, because at the end of the day, they really aren't interested in provisioning. They just want to get to sort of the meat, the heart of the business problem as it's explained through data. Okay, so you've got the tools for more than one type of analyst, and then you really need to be able to connect to nearly any data source. Data footprints out there are not static. They are growing at an unbelievable rate, right? We talk about it all the time, big data and different kinds of data. And so you really need a tool that does not pigeonhole you as to what you can connect to. And you need to look at three things. One, yes, the relational databases. That's really important. But you also need to respect the business intelligence platforms, because what you're doing there is you're respecting governance, and you're respecting master data management, and you're respecting investment, right? Companies have made investments in BI platforms, and when you've got your passive sort of data consumers that are consuming canned reports and dashboards, and they're out there, right? They're just passive data consumers, and that serves their need and what they need to accomplish. That's always going to be best served through a BI platform. And so you need to not break that model. You need to work very well with that model and respect that model. And that also gets you your IT buy-in into your solution as well, because you're not asking them to bend over backwards to accommodate you. And then cloud sources. I mean, you can't have a conversation today about data without talking cloud, right? You just can't. It's just the newest thing out there, and it's growing at such a rate because it really is meeting a need, right? A need to grow data exponentially. So those three things you need to keep in mind when you're talking about connecting to nearly any data source. I think you need all three. If you don't, you're definitely implementing a solution that has a built-in gap. You need to enable desktop data integration. So we have a little saying here at Toad, which is you can't have self-service business intelligence. You can't have self-service BI without self-service DI, data integration. Because wouldn't it be nice if all of our data needs were within one platform, but they're not, right? People have Salesforce data because Salesforce is the right platform for campaign data, for salespeople on the road. It's just the right platform for that data. And then you've got order data, right, which is serviced by an internal ERP system or whatever system internally you've got, and those are the right systems for those pieces of data. But that unique intelligence comes when you can blend those data streams together. And I'm sure everybody right now can think of one question where they've been handed data, they go, this is so awesome, this data. Can I see it matched up with more information about the customer? Can you tell me how many times the customer has called in to support? Can you tell me how many times this customer has responded to an email campaign? And that would really give me some interesting insight. I don't know if it's going to, change my world, but I'd like to see it to know if it can change my world, change my behaviors, change my spend in my organization. And you've been all hit with that same thing, like, oh, that's actually kind of tough to do. So self-service BI needs self-service BI. That's how we really get agile. That's how we really get interesting with the data. Lastly, the next thing I want you to be able to take away from the Toad BI and what we enable is elasticity, right? It's great to have enterprise tools that are built to service everyone in your organization. Those are expensive and costly and, not just in money, but in time to implement. There are some really interesting enterprise business intelligence enablers out there. And I think that they are really interesting and those technologies are interesting. However, they're costly, right? They're a commitment. And that kind of commitment before you know if it's what you need is really a barrier to entry, right? You can't try it out easily. Maybe you can do a proof of concept with the vendor, but how much do you really trust that? So you want something that's very elastic, that you can buy in with 5 users and expand to 50 and expand to 300, or buy in with 10 users and then populate throughout your organization in groups of 10, something that really can fit a project or an enterprise. And so that's one thing about Toad Business Intelligence Suite is it has that gap-filling sort of elasticity that you're looking for. And lastly, it has to be affordable. There's lots of business intelligence solutions that are out there that people have made investments in, and at the same time, they feel the pain as they try to add new users. I remember working in much smaller organizations than I'm in today where we were successfully using Salesforce.com. That was awesome, but we were very careful as to how many logins we actually had, right? We had people sharing logins, which is awful, and we had different things like that because we felt the pain of each new user that's brought on. So you want something that's affordable because if it works, you want to grow it, and you don't want that growing it to be a got you with the tool, right? You want that to be built into the model, that it can be easily grown because not only is it elastic, but it's also affordable. Okay, so let's go ahead and just give me a second to switch over to the product, and we'll use what time we have left here and just kind of take a look at the product in action. Let me go first into Toad Datapoint. My screen refresh is going to take a minute here, so give me a second. The conversation here has spurred a lot of questions and or sparked, I should say, a lot of questions, so that you're asking them through the Q&A tools that are enabled through this this webinar. So I'm hoping that when we get to the Q&A part here in a few minutes, there'll be a lot of good questions out there. Okay, so some things about Datapoint we haven't mentioned yet is the connectivity. So, I mean, we've talked about how you can connect to anything, but let me kind of just show you what that screen looks like. Over here in my left-hand panel are the connections that I currently have. And the kind of connectivity that we have through Datapoint is really almost all of your relational databases: Oracle, SQL Server, Teradata, Sybase, MySQL, a SQL Server, and then you've got an ODBC, a generic connector, and we use this to connect to Netezza, Greenplum. We have lots of Vertica connections. So we get a feeling from our user base. We have about 4,000 different companies that are using Datapoint today, and certainly more individual instantiations out there. And so we get a good feedback from our user base what they're connected to. So we have a really good large portfolio of connections that we've made successfully that are enabling our users. Along with that, I mentioned we connect to Excel. So you can connect to Excel like a data source here. The great thing about that is if you're a data provisioner, Excel is a rich source of data as well as a rich source of filtering opportunities when you're creating heterogeneous queries, right? Rather than typing in long queries that have these really sort of changeable filters, you can connect to Excel spreadsheets and create cross queries that do limiting functions. And then we have Quest Data Services. This is really sort of the secret sauce of the last release of the Toad BI suite. Toad Intelligence Central, I showed the screenshot showing how we can connect to all the sorts of different flavors of cloud and business intelligence and sort of NoSQL sources out there like Mongo, Hadoop, and Cassandra. Within Toad Datapoint itself, you can also make those connections through the Quest Data Services model here. And I'm showing a model. It's going to come up here in a second that has a couple of connections enabled for this particular user, including Oracle Business Intelligence, SAP Business Objects, and Hadoop Hive and Salesforce. And so not only can you use that Toad Intelligence Central platform as a way for IT to map and enable these sort of unusual and corporate sources, but the individuals from their desktop can connect directly to these sources, create the heterogeneous queries or the queries they need, perfect that data set with calculated columns and removing duplicates and doing the kind of roll-ups that you need, and then provision that back out to Toad Intelligence Central. So that diagram that I showed where Toad Intelligence Central is the one that's connecting out to all the sources is just a little bit misleading for simplicity of the diagram, because really both Toad Datapoint and Decision Point as individual users can make that connection, make those connections as well. So the use case that we're talking about is the ability to connect. Let me show you a dot here. So in the diagram I've demonstrated this process. I'm actually connecting to a business intelligence source. Okay, so this looks a little bit different than tables and columns, right? I've got like actually dimensional views because it's not truly a database I'm connecting to. It's a business intelligence semantic layer. It's Oracle Business Intelligence. And then I'm joining that in a single query to my ODBC source here, which is my Oracle Marketing Database. So I'm connecting these two things together. I'm writing a single query that's bringing together these items. I'm specifying a key. It's great if there's a key between your data. If not, there are ways to create sort of calculated keys that you can then connect in the same way and result set from that. So you can download, you can add your special sauce with your where clause. It's very easy to use interface to get to your result set. So all of that connectivity is without Intelligence Central. The special sauce with the collaboration, when I take this result set and I publish it. Okay, so now I'm provisioning this to my Decision Point user or other data point users as well to my Marketing Toad Intelligence Central platform. And a couple of things I'll mention super quick because I know we want to look at it, Decision Point as well as have time for questions. But the authentication here, we're respecting the the security that's inherent in the platform. So if for each platform I connect, I have to say the end user who consumes this data is going to authenticate themselves against that platform. And then I can send this data as snapshot views or a data set to Toad Intelligence Central, and I can specify who's going to use this on Toad Intelligence Central. So another level of security. These are my users as they're registered on Toad Intelligence Central, and this one I'm just going to make available to Peter and maybe Daniel, but not to Claudia. Okay, so just an idea here about you get the right data set and data point, and then you can provision it easily in their tool. So let me look at really quickly Toad Central. So Toad Intelligence Central is that tool I talked about that's really all about getting to the dimensional and the visual analysis of the data quicker. So I've got this data set here, which has been brought in through this one's an Excel spreadsheet. This one's Toad Intelligence Central. I'm going to load them both into memory. Matter of fact, I'm just going to go ahead and add the new data set here. What I'm actually doing at this point is saying that these two data sets are going to be integrated even here within Toad Decision Point. So they weren't integrated through Datapoint, but I can still integrate them through Decision Point if they have a common key. So Decision Point, powerful integration, but still a little simpler with a common field name between the two. And then what it's doing right now is loading it into that in-memory database. So I'm paying a little bit of price up front to load the data so that I can navigate through that data very quickly in the in-memory database. So that's what it's doing right now. And it's going to join this data together. Whoops, I actually got an error there. Back in Datapoint. Okay, here we go. So here's my columns. This is my Oracle Business Intelligence data. And here's some product code, some roll-up data that I brought into the Excel spreadsheet. Okay, and here's the shared key. It's being shared by part number. They both have a part number field. And so very simple for me to just drag this data in and to populate my dimensional analysis, and I could pull in my net amounts. I actually had that error earlier, so it's not going to pull it together. But you guys saw this in the screenshot earlier, and then quickly move from here and send these items to bar visualizations, tabular views. And we also integrate still with Excel, recognizing that people still want to use Excel. So if you enable us to do that and share data that way, we still enable it. Okay, I think I talked super fast in that last piece just to make sure that we had time for questions. So Joanna, I'm going to throw it back to you. So that we can get some questions.
Absolutely. Thanks, Julie. That was awesome. And as you saw, we have many, many questions. I've already fielded a bunch of them, but there are two that stood out that I'd love your input on. One question was, does the BI suite have integration capabilities to SharePoint?
It does. So there are different places that we integrate to SharePoint today, and there's certainly plans to do more in the future. So the place that we integrate best with SharePoint right now is on that Datapoint side. So from Datapoint, you can connect to SharePoint as a source. So if you have SharePoint lists out there that are holding critical business data, you can connect to that. And then once you connect, you can use it like it's any other data source. So you can join it into other queries, you can transformation and cleanse it, and then you can publish it out either as a data set or as a view or snapshot to Toad Intelligence Central. Also with Datapoint, you can provision it back out to SharePoint. So if what you're trying to do is populate a SharePoint list, you can do that with Datapoint. As we build out the SharePoint connectivity, we'll add it to both Intelligence Central, so your IT group can create the mappings in Intelligence Central to SharePoint, as well as having those Decision Point users being able to surface right off of SharePoint if they wanted to.
Great. Thanks so much. We have a second question that really focuses on how Toad BI Suite might be able to provide some insight into the data that is being connected to from Datapoint. I had two questions that asked us if the tooling is able to make logical suggestions for how the data environment might be accessed and combined. Do we have that type of capability today?
So what we do today is we will show you the back-end relationships as they exist. So for example, relational databases, that's pretty common, right? If not expected, where when you diagram out tables, you can expose all the relationships, whether it's the first order to the third order, you control that. In addition, when we connect to certain sources like Salesforce, right, where it's really a cloud source, but it is table in nature, we will expose the connectivity that comes from those sources. So when you pull in I have a Salesforce connection here. Wrong one. Where'd I go? I have a Salesforce connection here. Actually, pulled it up right, pulled it at the account table and relationships. Okay, so we expose what we can. What we also do is we have this diagramming tool in Toad Datapoint where if there's a relationship that I have discovered, I can draw it. And what I've done here is with this dash line, I annotated the diagram with my relationships, and then I can save this diagram and share it with others so that through a collaborative effort, you're exposing the relationships between disparate systems and then diagramming and documenting them. We don't today sort of do that suggestive, oh, okay, here's a similar field between the two products within Datapoint. As you saw earlier, I went really quick so you didn't catch it. In Decision Point, we do. So in Decision Point, if you're doing your data integration there, it's relying on field names being exactly the same, and so it will point out to you where field names are the same. But there certainly is, a way to document and share and start from a collaborative piece. And then just a quick note is that once I've documented this and I can save this database diagram and share it with point users, I can also use this as the basis of my query. So I've drawn the relation between my Oracle Business Intelligence data and my sales data in the Oracle relational database, and I can send that to the query engine. It takes ship and it makes it part of what I'm doing so that when I start to write my query, that relationship is there. So you can document it and then use that as the basis for all your queries.
I see we've come to the end of our time together. There are still a few outstanding questions that have yet to be answered. Rest assured, Julie and I will reach out to those individuals that have some pending questions and email you answers as soon as we can after the session. Thank you, everyone, for attending, and thank you, Julie, for a fabulous session.
Thanks, everybody. And then just really quickly on the screen, I've got two very quick URLs. But if you go to Quest.com and you look at the Business Intelligence Suite, we do have a trial download that I would love for you guys to partake in. So.
Okay, thank you, Joanna and Julie, for a very informative presentation. And thank you, everyone, for attending today's Modern Analyst webinar. I wanted to point out that this webinar, along with the slides, will be archived at ModernAnalyst.com within a few days. And this concludes today's event. So have a great day.